Hello everybody and welcome to another Gran Turismo 7 kind of predictions video, and this time I'm going to be talking about the track list. Now, as far as confirmed tracks, I've already done a video on that. I'll link that up there somewhere, but if you missed it, the basic gist of that is that at this point in time, we're going to assume every track from GT Sport is going to be carried over into GT 7, and we have two new additions that we know of so far, being the revised version of Trial Mountain that we of course saw in the announcement trailer, and the return of Daytona from Gran Turismo 5 and 6. But as far as this video is concerned, we have 10 more tracks to discuss. Some of these are other original circuits from the past of Gran Turismo that I think will be coming back, and in a lot of cases there is evidence to suggest that, as well as we're going to be talking about some real world circuits from the past of Gran Turismo, and a couple of brand new ones that I think we may see in GT7. But we're going to kick off with a couple of tracks I've discussed before. Perhaps somewhat obviously, we'll start with Deep Forest. Although there are plenty of other tracks that have a very high chance, this is perhaps the highest of them all, as firstly, fun fact, it's Kaz's personal favourite of the Gran Turismo original circuit, and it was also intended to be in GT Sport. And in an interview in 2018, he goes into the complications of Deep Forest implementation by saying that if we want to bring that into the quality of GT Sport now, there's a lot that we have to redesign and it's not that easy. The problem we had with some of the older tracks from previous Gran Turismo games was the scale being off in certain places. The size of the trees are very large, or the width of the curbstones, etc. There were curbstones that were wider than cars. So I wouldn't be surprised if when Deep Forest comes back, it's not exactly as we remember it, although personally I don't think it will undergo the same kind of drastic change that we have seen with Trial Mountain. But moving on into the second track that I've mentioned before in that same video as I mentioned Deep Forest, we have Tokyo RT46. Now this one is another fan favourite, so that's a reason in itself for it to come back, but also it's a real road. It's based on real life, and therefore there shouldn't be any of those scaling issues, etc. So its implementation should be a lot easier to achieve, and yeah, I think this one's very likely to come back. And for my third prediction, we're fittingly going to complete the Gran Turismo Holy Trinity of circuits that have been there since the very beginning with Grand Valley. Now, obviously that's a reason in itself. It's a very important part of the franchise. It's been there since the very beginning. A lot of people like it. Personally, it's not actually my favourite circuit. I never liked it that much when I was playing it back in Gran Turismo 5 and 6, for example, but I know a lot of people do like it and will be happy to see it back, and yeah, I think there's definitely a very good chance that it will come back and kind of complete that brief of the past, present and future of Gran Turismo, all supposedly coming together for GT7. And for similar reasons, I'm putting my fourth and final of the Gran Turismo original circuits in here, being the high-speed ring. Now, this one was also found in GT Sport data, and, perhaps more interestingly, has been teased recently by Next Level Racing, the people who make the official PlayStation racing seats. Now yes, there is a good chance that that particular tidbit means less than nothing, but I thought it was interesting to point out nonetheless, and regardless of that, High Speed Ring has a very good chance of coming back. I'd say it's another staple of the Gran Turismo series, so why wouldn't it really? Moving on to my fifth pick then, and we have a bit of a wild card. This one is not a specific track prediction per se, although there are a few options that it could be, but I'm predicting that a kart track is going to come back. Now, this may be one of the ones from GT6, being the GT Arena or Kart Space, which was also in GT5, but I do think we'll see a kart track even. There was supposed to be one in GT Sport, apparently, based off of the Kyoto layout, but we never saw that. But I do think if karts stay in the game, which I'm sure they will be, we're going to see a kart track. Speaking of which, just a random thought I've had, it'll be interesting to see if we get more diversity within the karts, because carried over to GT Sport we only got the top spec shifter karts. I do wonder if those lower powered 100 and 125 versions will appear in GT7. But I digress. We're now going to move in to the real world circuits that have been in Gran Turismo before that I think are going to return like Daytona did. And in a similar vein, Indianapolis. It's just as well loved as Daytona and just as historically significant, perhaps even more so. So if Daytona is coming back, I think that's all the indication we really need that we'll see Indy 2. And I imagine it will be in the same form as it was in GT5 and 6, where we'll have both the oval and the road course. I'm sure that will be the case for Daytona as well. I did only see the oval in the trailer, but obviously that's just a trailer, probably from a very early build of the game. We'll see what happens with that, but yeah, I'll be very surprised if both of these tracks don't appear with their road course layouts. And speaking of which, considering we're discussing both of them, I think especially if we have both of them, that's almost a dead cert that we're going to see NASCAR come back. Now, I think it was intended to be in GT Sport as it was in the credits, so it just comes back to that recurring theme that we're going to see a lot of content originally slated for GT Sport being pushed back and shelved until GT7 comes out, presumably. So moving on to yet another historically important circuit that disappeared after Gran Turismo 6, we have Monaco. Now, why this wasn't in GT Sport in the first place honestly baffles me, and that also applies to the next track we're going to discuss as well. But yeah, I think this one is very likely for GT7, and I do think it's another one of those pieces of content that maybe was supposed to come to GT Sport but has been delayed and pushed back to GT7. Of course, we saw a little ode to it in one of the teaser pictures for the Lamborghini Vision Gran Turismo, which again is in that same category of probably was supposed to come to GT Sport. In fact, I think they said spring or summer of this year, which didn't happen. And yeah, I think now we're going to have to wait until GT7 for that, because it seems as though those GT Sport updates, content-wise at least, are dead. So my 8th prediction, if you haven't guessed it already, is Silverstone. Another one of those two F1 tracks that inexplicably disappeared after GT Sport. In fact, Silverstone was only introduced in GT6, and yeah, a very confusing decision its absence seems, because in GT6, it seems like they put a lot of resources into it, and it was quite a big part of that game, with the Senna challenges. They had multiple layouts with the Stowe configuration and whatnot. So yeah, very confusing that it wasn't in GT Sport. Maybe there is a reason, maybe there isn't, but yeah, it's in a lot of racing games nowadays, so I don't think licensing would be an issue. But yeah, highly likely for GT7 considering its absence in GT Sport, and here's hoping it's there. So now we're going to move into the first of my 2 predictions for brand new real world circuits that I think will show up. We'll start with Sportsland Sugo in Japan. Now, I think this one's quite underrepresented in racing games in general. It's in Project Cars, but off the top of my head I can't think of anything that I've played that this track's appeared in. And it seems like a very obvious choice for Gran Turismo, being obviously a Japanese circuit. It hosts Super GT and Super Formula races, so it's a wonder really that it hasn't showed up before. It would have been a logical addition to GT Sport, considering that's when the Super Formula cars were introduced. But here's hoping for GT7. I personally really like the track, and I think a lot of people do, so let's see if it happens. For the 10th and final of these circuit predictions, I'm predicting Imola is going to show up in GT7. Now, I think perhaps Sugo is a little more likely of these two brand new circuits, but I think Imola has a strong chance. Its representation seems to be growing in racing games as of late, and it seems well suited to the online aspect and sport mode races, for example. I think especially the Group 4 and Group 3 cars would be a perfect fit for this track. There'll be a lot of accidents, it's definitely a very challenging circuit, but yeah, I think if it was implemented into G7, it would get a lot of use and be a great addition to the game, and definitely worthwhile too. But that's it for my 10 circuit predictions for Gran Turismo 7. Let me know what you think, and if you want a part 2 where I go over some more tracks that I think may also show up in the game. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.